Dirty, dingy cars, late service, and crazy people. As if subways can't get scary enough, we are going to discuss hauntings that happen on MTA subway platforms and trains. August 28th, 1991, Robert E. Ray is the motorman of the 4 train, and he causes a major derailment. And during his trip, he kept missing these stations by a few cars, and people were getting agitated and frustrated, but it's late at night, and if they missed their train, they would have to wait around for another one. Sometimes subways don't run all night. I don't know what it was like in 1991 because I was only 4 years old, so I don't remember this incident at all. It was my mother who related this to me because we used to live right across the street from the 4 train at one point when I was a very little girl. So she remembers this incident really well. And she told me about this, so I did a little research, and Mr. Ray had missed several stops. He was completely bombed. He was just not able to do his job. And unfortunately, when he reached the 14th Street and Union Square station, right before he entered, there was a major collision, and he was responsible for the deaths of 5 people. Most of the deaths, according to articles that I found online, occurred within the second car. And that must be because the first car was completely off the track, so the second car must have been impacted by this. And I can't even imagine the fear of a train going 50 miles an hour and then suddenly slamming into cement pillars. So a bunch of people were hurt, 5 people died, and Mr. Ray was arrested and charged. And as the story goes, people who have come to the Union Square station, no matter what time, people have claimed that they feel a sense of sadness. It's ominous. And that I've heard these reports from people who aren't even from New York. I've heard it from people who were too young to remember that or weren't even born when this had occurred. Like I said, I was only 4 years old, so I never knew about this. But I used to spend a lot of time at Union Square, and one time I mentioned that to my mother because when I was like in my early 20s, I was going through my bohemian phase. And I told my mom I was spending a lot of time there, and she's the one who told me about this incident, and it's always intrigued me. So I looked up accounts about it, and there are several people who have said that they sometimes hear sobbing. They also hear screams really late at night. There are people who take that train late at night because a lot of bars and restaurants are located over there. So most of the reports seem to be an overnight thing. I have heard of reports occurring during the day. There was one man who was waiting for the train after he spent an evening at the bar with his coworkers to celebrate a promotion, and he said that he was standing by the very end of the platform. He didn't want to be in the middle because apparently there was some homeless guy on the platform that made him uncomfortable. So he went to the end, and he was standing there. And even though the train hadn't arrived, he claims that he heard the squeal of wheels coming down because when the train comes in, it makes a very distinct clatter and there's like a squeal as it stops. And he heard it even though there was nothing there and there were no other trains across from his platform. Now, of course, he was drunk and he could have just been hearing the trains that were in different sections of the station because the station is huge. But he said that he had a really ominous feeling and something kept telling him to look up, and every time he would, he didn't see anything. Another person that I read about said that she was standing there with her friends, and it was in the middle of the day, it was very busy, and they went to the end to avoid the crowds, and they could hear sobbing coming from the tunnel, right where the location of the accident happened. Supposedly, this woman was a visitor from the Midwest, so she would have very there's a chance she could have known about it and just sensationalize what it is that she did experience, but this woman was very disturbed by this. And the only reason I know about it is because I know her through someone else. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And people have also claimed that they can hear the train coming in even when it's not there. So the drunk businessman aside, other people have said that too. There's also a sense of foreboding and sadness that people have claimed, which I find to be fascinating. Unfortunately, no one has seen anything. No one has seen a replay of this accident. No one has seen a beat up train coming into the station. And no one has seen people coming in. But they hear people all the time. They can hear screams, they hear crying, and they, like most people, I constantly hear about the feeling of foreboding and sadness that people experience when they arrive at this station. I personally have never noticed that myself. Um, you know, I mean, it's an interesting story, and I do believe in ghosts, but I always try to look for the most logical answer first. And I don't know. If you guys have ever taken that train and been at that station, maybe you may have picked up on something, but I personally have not. So I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are. As to be expected, a lot of the times when death does occur in the subway system, it occurs because someone was hit by a train. Now, they could have fallen, they could have jumped, or they could have been pushed. And all those situations are horrible and very sad. And many times, people have claimed that they have seen the spirits of the dead either on the platform or on the tracks. One account that I found to be really fascinating was there was a man who got hit by a train several years ago. I want to say it was less than 10 years ago. And about 2 months later, people started noticing that there was a man that they could only see from the shoulders up on the tracks. So that means that they were seeing his shoulders and his head and nothing else. And it looked like he was looking over the edge of the train platform, which would scare the crap out of anyone, myself included. And he would always appear right before the train would come in. This was the one train, and people were screaming and they're yelling for this guy to get off the tracks. And as soon as the train comes in, he's gone. There's nothing there. There's no accident. There's no blood. There's no scream from him. It's just as if he's looking at people right before he goes, and then the train comes in and he vanishes. Motormen have been asked about it, and they never claim to see anything. So I just found that to be really fascinating. And I would be terrified, frankly, if I saw that. That would be like the most bizarre situation I could come up with. Like, I can't even think of what I don't know. I don't know. Like, whenever I've been on on the subways and been uncomfortable, it's just because there's like crazy people. But I guess I'd rather see that than just the upper portion of someone looking at me over the edge of the platform. That just sounds terrifying. I don't have the name of the man that was hit, and for all I know, this is just another urban legend. But I thought that it was interesting and spooky enough to definitely add into this video. If anyone knows of this story and who the man was that got hit, please leave a comment so that way I can look into it further, because many people have gotten hit by trains and I can't find anything specific correlating between this ghost sighting and the person that was hit by the one train. If you take the 6 train down to City Hall, which is the last stop, there is a location that's called Brooklyn Bridge City Hall, and that's the station that intercepts with the 4 and the 5 line. But if you stay on the 6 line, it will pass by an abandoned station known simply as City Hall. The station was opened October 27th, 1904, and it closed on December 31st, 1945, due to its close proximity to other stations. And it was also a shorter platform than the trains that were running could accommodate. Because remember, subway trains have 10 cars. This platform, I believe, only has a room for 4 or 5. And I know that there's the Whitehall station is the same thing, but they still use the Whitehall station. However, the City Hall one, which was once very grandiose, it was gorgeous. I've seen it. I've actually stayed on the 6 train just so I could watch the station pass by. Uh, the MTA museum does allow visitation. I don't know if they do it anymore because of COVID-19, but I know prior to COVID, they did allow visitation. It had to be scheduled with the museum, but this is a fact. It was very gorgeous. It still is gorgeous, but it's very creepy and sad looking in a way because it was once so decorative and so ornate, and now it's just sitting there abandoned, and rats and mole people probably live in there now. And it's a terrible shame because it's beautiful. So the 6 train will do a loop from the southbound station back to the northbound to go back up to the Bronx, because it runs from Pelham Park to City Hall in Manhattan. So a couple of times I was like, oh, I'm gonna do it, and I never did because I thought that I'd get in trouble with the MTA, but I I was never stopped, so I stayed on the train after I would leave work sometimes, and finally I said, I want to see what this looks like in person. So I did the loop, and the station is gorgeous. Everything is green and white, and there's like hints of this orangey gold color. And the ceilings are very cavernous and rounded out, and it's a gorgeous station, and it's a terrible shame that it's not being used anymore. Um, and it does have a kind of sad feel to it. But what's interesting is that when it was being built, people were hearing echoes of a language that they didn't understand. They were hearing screams, they were hearing moans, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. So finally, one of the men that was working in the trenches to help build this station was a Native American, and he claimed that this was a language that they were picking up on, and the haunting occurred because of the natives that lived there prior to the station being built, at least hundreds of years before. There was a battle that went on, and these men were never buried in an appropriate way. So they were haunting the station and haunting the men that were building the station, and it got so bad that they literally had to have a shaman come in and bless the area. And a shaman works sort of like an exorcist priest would in the Catholic religion. You know, he comes in, he chases the evil away, and he leaves a blessing for positivity to commence, I guess you could say. So I read about that, and I thought that was kind of freaky that there was a sort of Native American exorcism going on. Uh, I don't know, maybe there's some truth to it. I mean, we all know what the story goes with Native American burial grounds and anything that has to do with their culture because they were here first, and Western civilization has stomped all over that and ruined it. So a lot of the times when I hear situations like this, I kind of have a little inkling to believe it. Not 100%, but I believe that something must have happened because it was such a negative situation for these men. Okay, and the last story that I would like to leave you guys with is the story of Falla, the little Scottish Terrier. Falla was President Roosevelt's dog, and the two of them were very close, and they were often photographed and seen together, and this dog loved his master. And President Roosevelt had his own personal station underneath the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, and I believe that that's also known as a ghost platform, which doesn't mean that it's haunted, it just means that it's not used. Um, so many times, for some reason, instead of being seen at that location, I guess because no one uses it, his dog to this day has been spotted at the Times Square station, and I find that to be very fascinating. Actually, not Times Square, it's Grand Central. They're both 42nd Street, so my mind was elsewhere. I apologize. This was at the Grand Central station. Many times people will see a little Scottish Terrier walking around, and he seems to be looking for someone. He looks up at people's faces, he's glancing around, and then he trots along and he's still looking. And obviously he's searching for something, and people say that this is the ghost of Falla looking for his master, President Roosevelt. And I saw pictures of this dog, and I saw him with the president. I just think that the two of them look adorable together. um, and the validity of this story is just for fun. I don't believe this at all. I mean, there are cases where people say that animals have come back to visit their masters, the people that they loved, and the people who love them. And I mean, maybe that's true. Personally, I just don't know if I believe that this dog would be walking around in a train station that had very little to do with his life, looking for a man who's been dead for over 80 years. Like I said, I mean, I try to keep an open mind, and I love anything that's considered bizarre and unexplainable. Then this story is actually more sad, and it's kind of cute, and it's weird, and I like how all three emotions are evoked just from this one story. I have never seen the dog. I don't know anyone who has. I haven't read any articles or seen videos where people were like, yeah, I saw Follow the Scotty. It's a fascinating story nonetheless, and it's an interesting urban legend. And I do hope that Falla and Mr. Roosevelt are together in whatever realm we go to when we're dead. It would be nice to know that our pets are there with us, as well as the people who loved us before. So, thanks for listening to my little weirdo video about interesting hauntings that occur in the New York City subway station. And if you have any that you'd like to add, I could always make more parts to this video. So just leave me some comments and let me know, and I'll cover those stories as well. All right, guys. Bye bye.